For at least 50 years I've wanted to go to New Zealand. When I retired last year, Jocelyn and I saw our opportunity to make the trip, but we didn't want to make a quick one. We wanted to go for a month. New Zealand is in the South Pacific and consists of two main islands, about 6,700 miles from our home and about 1,000 miles east of Australia. We live in Corralitos, California, and in order to be able to go for a month, we had to get our dog packed up and off to her trainer where she'd spend the next month at school. We got a car service from home, and it took us up to San Francisco Airport where we were going to leave on an 11 o'clock flight. The flight to New Zealand is over 12 hours. We left on Tuesday evening and crossed the international date line to arrive in Auckland on Thursday morning. We arrived in Auckland and got a view from the Harbour Bridge. You can see the Sky Tower, which is a landmark recognized all over the world. Our first B&B is in the suburb of Devonport on the northeast side of Auckland Harbour. Devonport's right on the water, and we spent the first couple of days just adjusting to the time change and getting acclimated. We took walks around the town and started to notice some unusual plants. This tree reminded us of the giant fig tree in Lahaina, Maui. We took the ferry across the harbor to downtown Auckland and looked around, and then ended up heading to the Auckland Zoo. We saw capybara from South America. We saw spider monkeys from Central America. We saw emu from Australia. Turns out there aren't that many interesting animals that are native to New Zealand. They do have giant walking sticks.
Oh boy.
We took the ferry back to Devonport and spent the next couple of days just walking around the local town. We rented a car and drove north to our next B&B, but on the way we had to stop at what I'm sure Jocelyn thinks was the highlight of the trip, Sheep World. Of course we saw lots of sheep, but the only kind of wool that's considered better than New Zealand sheep wool comes from alpaca, and all these alpaca looked pretty smug. They also had goats, and they had the spokesman for the New Zealand Dental Association. Our destination is a little town called Paratua in an inlet on the northeast coast of North Island. It had this beautiful little bridge that separates the south part of town from the north part of town. Part of a walk to get to the beach there, and beautiful beaches everywhere. The beaches are really incredible, and the only place I've seen anything more spectacular at the beach is on Bora Bora in Tahiti. We made day trips and hikes, and every place we went we saw spectacular vistas like these waterfalls. The paths are very well maintained. Really great respect for the outdoors among New Zealanders. One of the reasons we wanted to come to New Zealand was for fishing, so we studied up on the rules, and I bought a new rod. We bought fishing licenses even before we left the US. I fished from beaches all over. I fished from this beach. I fished from this beach. I fished here. Fished off of piers. I tried different lures. I tried different baits. No luck. Oh, how'd that get in here? Anyway, Jocelyn said she got a big one, but all I caught was this. We'd heard about the Bay Love Islands, which is where Captain Cook made several landings in 1769, and while we were there we made a ferry trip across to the little town of Russell. We saw a replica of Captain Cook's ship, and went to his museum. After 3 or 4 days, it was back from Patatua to Auckland. We made some hikes in the local area. We saw the cathedral. We made a trip to the Sky Tower right at sunset, which was really spectacular. Here's the view from about 900 feet up. We spent one more night in Auckland before we started the next leg of our trip. The next day we boarded a train that would take us right down the center of North Island from Auckland all the way to the capital in Wellington. There's a great viewing car with no windows so you can get fresh air and see the sights, and everywhere you look there's just beautiful landscapes and vistas. And around every corner there's more sheep. We spent one night in Wellington, and then the next morning we got up early and boarded a ferry that would take us across Cook Strait from North Island to South Island. We happened to catch it on a flat, calm day, and it was just beautiful. Reminded us very much like the Pacific Northwest. Looked a lot like Puget Sound. After about 3.5 hours, we got to the end of the ferry ride in a town called Picton on North Island. In Picton, we boarded another train that would take us down the east coast of South Island from Picton all the way down to Christchurch, about a 6-hour trip. And along the way, there again, just beautiful views everywhere you looked. Occasionally we even saw something that wasn't a sheep. These ponds fill with seawater and evaporate, and they collect salt. Again, there's just one after another beautiful beaches with no people on them. We found our B&B in Christchurch, but we didn't get a car. We found that the best way to get around was on these. There's parks everywhere along the Avon River that flows right through the middle of Christchurch. We did some hiking. We saw the sights. We saw punting. We visited a war memorial called the Bridge of Remembrance. We visited all the little shops. Saw artwork. There's a lot of murals on the sides of buildings. We looked at the architecture, very European looking. We also saw a pretty good collection of native artwork. By this time we were getting a little more adventurous, so we hopped a flight from Christchurch to Queenstown, which is right in the middle of New Zealand's Southern Alps. And it's just surrounded by the most spectacular mountains you can imagine. Again, beautiful beaches. And things started to get a lot more exciting. We wanted to visit Milford Sound, but we didn't want to go by bus or car that takes a long time. Instead, we took one of these. And we got to have this guy as our co-pilot. Been about 35 years since I'd flown a plane, and everything's gone digital, so I decided to let the other guy take the controls. But the flight was just spectacular. We flew over glaciers. You could see a light dusting of ash from the fires in Australia that had settled on these glaciers. There's just too many lakes to name. Finally, Milford Sound opens onto the Tasman Sea that lies between New Zealand and Australia. The landing in Milford Sound is pretty tricky. The pilot has to turn the plane around in these narrow canyons, and I think Jocelyn was pretty happy when he got on the ground safely. We were really lucky to catch a sunny day. Apparently they only have about 50 sunny days a year. We boarded a boat to go on a tour of Milford Sound. There are hanging waterfalls lining the sound. The sides of the fjord are so steep that the captain can drive the boat right up underneath the waterfalls. He had the crew get out a couple of racks of drinking glasses and put them on the bow of the boat, where they filled up with the most pure water ever. We saw dolphin and seals in the sound. Didn't get any pictures, but we saw them. By the time we finished, everybody on the boat was feeling really happy. We'd just seen one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's like Yosemite, only 5,000 feet tall instead of 2,000 feet, and with an ocean in the middle of it. The vegetation also was surprisingly tropical, given that we were at about 43 degrees south latitude. And for the return flight, guess who our co-pilot was? We got back to Queenstown and spent the next couple of days seeing the sights there, including a trip by gondola up to the peak right behind the town. We had a great lunch in the restaurant at the top. You could see everything from there. A lot of different activities that you can do at this place. Parasailing. Here's another. Thought we'd see more when we walked down. How'd you like to rent that place?
How'd you like to see somebody jump out right now that I have my video?
Oh, Jesus. She's waving at you. Oh. I asked Jocelyn why she took this picture, and she told me to look more closely. Somebody did jump. We suited up for the next activity, which was to drive the luge down the track, taking us about half a mile in these little carts. It's a really windy road with huge banked corners. Really a lot of fun. Another thing we didn't do while we were in Queenstown was indoor skydiving. This guy really knew what he was doing. We spent the last few hours in Queenstown at a park that had the most beautiful setting right on the water and beautiful trees throughout. We left Queenstown, flew back to Auckland, and in Auckland we decided to make a day trip by ferry to a place called Waiheke Island. It's a little tiny island with little narrow roads. Jocelyn was really concerned about my driving on the left. I don't know why. But we decided not to get a car. Instead, we got these. And she was really glad that we were on scooters when she saw this. The island itself is really pastoral. Just some gentlemen farms, some vineyards, and of course more beautiful beaches. And at the end of the day, we took the ferry back to Auckland and got there just after sunset. So back on good roads, I was allowed to drive on the left again, and we rented a car for the rest of the trip. We did day hikes, saw a few more deserted beaches. Jocelyn's been taking pictures for a long time, but I think this is the single best photo she's ever taken. We visited a wild animal park where this guy provides the security. Both of us like primates, and I thought that's why Jocelyn was taking pictures in bad lighting conditions at the next exhibit. She took a whole bunch of pictures. Turns out she was shooting the ape on the left, not the ape on the right. We wanted to see the geothermal features around Rotorua, and on the way we passed a huge open pit gold mine that's about a half a mile across and about 800 feet deep. In Rotorua they invented something called zorbing, which is like climbing into a giant hamster ball and rolling down a hill, and of course this is something Jocelyn just had to try. So here she is in the Zorb ball. Born again. Driving towards the geothermal area, we picked up this interesting young man who was hitchhiking all over New Zealand. We visited a thing called Hookah Falls. This is water that's emptying from Lake Taupo. Very nice hike along the shoreline. We got to Lake Taupo where Jocelyn made me take this really corny photo, but the lake was really beautiful. Sailboats out racing. Finally we headed off to the geothermal area. Here's a medium-sized crater that's just oozing hot water and steam. There are little craters everywhere, and they bubble and steam and emit sulfur and all kinds of other gases. It's not like anything I'd ever seen before except at Yellowstone. I don't know why, but Jocelyn signed up to take a class to take raw wool and turn it into slippers. So this shows the process, and here's the final product. On our second to the last day, we visited a botanical garden in Hamilton that was really exceptional. They had separate garden exhibits showing the garden traditions from all over the world. I'm not sure what this one is. Finally the trip was over and we had a few hours to kill in the lounge at the airport. We were fearful about customs delays at San Francisco, but when we got there it was absolutely empty. Well, the trip's over now, and what's left is this video and what's locked in our memories. I guess as we get older the memories might disappear too, but we'll always have the video. It's a lot longer than I intended. Thanks for watching.